Welcome to Z Time. We know you're a survivor, and thanks for listening. We love you. On with the story. The snow in the Boston Public Garden had that clean, postcard look, powdered paths, beach tracing white, the lagoon skinned over with ice that caught the late morning sun. I stood near the bridge, hands buried in my coat pockets, breath fogging in front of me, trying to remember why I'd ever thought flying up here in January was a good idea. 2 days of meetings. That was the deal. 2 days of polite handshakes, glass conference rooms, and PowerPoint decks about risk exposure and year-end positioning. Then back to New York. I was staying at the Four Seasons on Boylston Street, expense account luxury, close enough to walk everywhere. Boston was supposed to be a change of scenery. My phone buzzed. Mom, have you heard anything about this virus? Sister, hospitals in NJ are weird right now. People saying it's neurological. Group chat. Family. Is this like rabies? Or bacterial meningitis? I frowned, thumb hovering over the screen. I'd seen the headlines in the cab from Logan. Vague alerts. Talking heads using words like emerging, isolated, under investigation. Fever, confusion, respiratory distress. A clip of a doctor in scrubs saying they were still trying to understand transmission vectors. I typed back something non-committal, probably media hype, I'm fine, and slipped the phone away. The frog pond was open for skating, a cluster of tourists wobbling across the ice, laughter sharp in the cold air. I watched them for a moment, smiling despite myself. That's when I noticed a man standing near the center. He wasn't skating. He was just there, upright, still. At first I thought he'd fallen and frozen in embarrassment, bracing himself before trying again. But he didn't move. People flowed around him, cutting wide arcs, irritated glances thrown his way. His head was tilted slightly forward, chin tucked, arms hanging loose at his sides. Someone brushed past him too closely. The man jerked, not smoothly, but in a sharp, delayed motion, like a puppet tugged by a fraying string. His mouth opened. No sound came out at first. Then a wet, rattling moan, low and wrong, carried across the ice. A woman screamed. The man lunged, not fast, but sudden enough. She slipped, went down hard, and he fell on top of her with a clumsy weight that knocked the breath from her lungs. People scattered. The music cut out. Security rushed in. Someone shouted for EMS. I backed away, heart thudding, telling myself it was a seizure, hypothermia, anything but the thought crawling up the back of my spine. By the time I reached the street, sirens were already closing in. I didn't go back to the hotel. I walked instead, letting Boylston carry me east, the city buzzing with attention I couldn't quite name yet. Quincy Market was crowded, warm, alive. The smell of fried food and sugar hit me like a wave as I pushed inside. For a while it worked. I wandered the stalls, leaned into being a tourist, bought a paper tray of fresh oysters, slurped them down standing up, followed it with a bowl of clam chowder, so hot it burned my tongue. My phone buzzed again. Emergency alert, public health notice. Reports of violent behavior associated with ongoing viral outbreak. Eastern United States. New York State reporting significant case increases. The words violent behavior echoed in my head. Someone dropped a tray nearby. The crash of plastic on tiles sounded too loud. Heads turned. A man near the center of the hall staggered, knocking into a table. His skin was grayish, mottled, veins standing out dark beneath the surface. His jaw worked uselessly, teeth clicking together. He moaned. Screams tore through the marketplace, as if someone had ripped a seam open. People ran. Chairs toppled. I saw a woman fall and not get back up, 3 figures converging on her, with that same jerky, relentless gait. They bent over her, movements messy and urgent, tearing into her with their teeth like wild animals. I didn't stay to see more. Police surged in from the doors, shouting commands, batons raised. One fired his weapon. The sound cracked like a bomb indoors, deafening. The infected barely flinched unless struck in the head. Then they dropped, suddenly inert, like strings cut. I was shoved, knocked to the floor. When I looked up, a policeman was down a few feet away, blood darkening the tiles beneath him. One of the infected stood over him, chewing at his shoulder, wet sounds echoing in my skull. I don't remember deciding to move. I just did. The gun was in my hand before I realized it. Heavy, unfamiliar. I'd fired once before at a team-building thing in Connecticut. Targets, paper silhouettes. Nothing that moved. Nothing that made noise. An infected turn in the aisle turned toward me, drawn by motion, by breath, by fear. I fired. The recoil shocked at my arm. The shot hit him in the chest. He stumbled, but kept coming. I fired again. This time, impact was high in the neck. He dropped. Everything inside me went very still. I grabbed a backpack on the floor. Someone's abandoned. Some sort of survival instinct kicked in. I thought to myself, water, food, supplies. I slipped low into stalls, grabbing some water from fridges, and any food I could get my hands on as quick as possible. Candy, seafood. I didn't care. It's hard to think when you're terrified. My phone showed no signal now, just a spinning wheel. I found a police radio on the ground, crackling with static. Fall back to Old North Church. Limited fortification. Repeat, Old North Church. I knew I had to get out of this market. I hoped outside the city wasn't unraveling. Crouching near the exit, there was a group of others. Ellen, a nurse from Cambridge with blood on her sleeve that wasn't hers. Mark, a grad student who wouldn't stop shaking. Luis, quiet, carrying a crowbar like it was part of his arm. It seemed like the absolute horror on all of our faces drew us together. Human emotion needing others by our side in such a desperate situation. There wasn't much communication. We started to move together, as by osmosis. By the time we slipped out of Quincy Market, daylight was already losing the fight. The sky had gone the color of dirty steel, clouds hanging low enough to feel oppressive, like the city was being slowly capped. The snow that felt quaint hours earlier now muffled our footsteps just enough to make every unintended sound stand out. The crunch of ice under a boot, the clatter of a dropped can, the rasp of someone breathing too fast. The market behind us was no longer a place. It was a beacon. Screams still echoed from inside, short, cut off, replaced by that low, wet chorus of moans that seemed to seep into everything. The infected clustered at the entrances, drawn by noise and movement, bumping into one another with clumsy persistence. Some had fallen and were trying to stand, bones bending the wrong way, limbs refusing to cooperate. Others just kept walking, heads lolling, jaws slack, blood frozen dark against their clothes. We didn't run. Not yet. We could see infected being drawn to people screaming and running. Movement, noise. Running was a last resort. It drew eyes. Sound drew bodies. We moved east first, ducking between parked cars on North Market Street, using them as cover. I kept glancing at the glass storefronts. Every reflection felt like it might move independently, betray us. The cold air carried the smell now. Rot unmistakable. Sweet and sour at the same time, like meat left too long in a fridge that had lost power. Infected were prowling the streets. I wouldn't say aimlessly, it was patience. My phone buzzed once, then went dead. No signal, no bars, just the time blinking in the corner of the screen like it still mattered. Which way? Mark whispered. North, I said. Avoid open streets. That decision saved us and nearly got us killed. We cut through narrow side streets, places that felt forgotten even before everything fell apart. Trash bags torn open, snow churned with footprints that went nowhere good. The infected wandered here too, but fewer of them, alone, distracted, drawn to distant sirens or flashing lights blocks away. One stood under a flickering street lamp, swaying gently like it was seasick. Its coat hung open, chest soaked black with dry blood. One arm ended at the elbow, torn or crushed. When Ellen brushed past too close, it turned, mouth open with a sound like water draining from a clogged sink. We froze. It took a step toward us. Then another. Luis raised the crowbar. Slow, deliberate. I brought the gun up, aligning the sights the way I barely remember from that range day. Front post, squeeze, don't jerk. The shot cracked through the street. The infected dropped instantly, skull shattered, body slack. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the city answered. Moans rose from every direction. overlapping, multiplying. Shapes shifted at the ends of streets. A car alarm started somewhere to the west, shrill and unending. Move now, I urged. We ran, not blindly, controlled panic, feet slipping on ice, breath burning our lungs. We cut across Cross Street, ducked into an alley thick with shadows and the smell of piss and rot. Something grabbed at my coat from behind a dumpster, hands slick and cold. But Louis slammed the crowbar down, crushing bone, and we kept going. By the time we reached the edge of the North End, night had fallen fully. Streetlights glowed through falling snow, halos of amber light that revealed too much and not enough. The infected clustered where light and sound pooled, intersections, storefronts, stall buses. They moved with that same awful patience, jerky and imprecise, but never stopping. Old North Church rose ahead of us, its white steeple barely visible against the dark sky. Getting there meant crossing open ground. There was no way around it. We waited behind a line of abandoned cars, watching, counting, timing their movements. The infected weren't fast, but they were constant. They drifted toward noise and stalled, then drifted again, like debris in a slow current. On my mark, I whispered. We went low and fast, boots slipping, hearts hammering loud enough that I was sure they'd hear it. Halfway across, someone shouted, far off, somewhere near Hanover Street. The infected turned as one, head snapping toward the sound. That bought us seconds. We reached the church steps just as the first of them began to wander back. Hands grabbed at our legs as we scrambled up. A police officer leaned over the barricade, hauling us the last few feet. The door slammed shut behind us, wood reverberating with impact as bodies pressed against it from the outside. Inside, the church was dim and packed tight with fear. People huddled beneath centuries-old beams, candles guttering, radios murmuring static and bad news. Snow melted off our coats and pooled on the stone floor, leaving dark footprints that marked our arrival like confession. I leaned against the wall, chest heaving, gun heavy in my hand. We'd made it, barely, and as the moans outside grew louder, stacking against the walls with patient inevitability, I understood something with a clarity that cut through the adrenaline. Night had changed the rules. From here on out, every hour would be harder than the last. Old North Church loomed out of the snow like something from another century. Barricades at the doors. Police inside, exhausted, eyes hollow. They let us in after checking for bites, for fever. It felt temporary. Everything did. Supplies were thin. Ammunition thinner. People talked in low voices about the USS COnstitution, about the drawbridge, about defensible ground and water access. It sounded like hope, fragile and desperate. The police inside the church knew of some resistance being built on the old ship as well. I slept in small chunks, waking in a panic, visions of the horrific day just past. The church was holding for now, but time brought about a seemingly inevitable failure. The Old North Church didn't fall all at once. That was the worst part. It started with sound. A dull, rhythmic thumping from somewhere beyond the north wall, with flexing, nails whining under stress. At first it blended into the night, into the constant background noise of a city dying. Distant sirens, the wind threading through empty streets, the low, animal moans drifting from unseen corners. Someone said it was probably debris shifting in the cold. Someone else said nothing, but tightened their grip on a bat. Inside the church, the air was stale and heavy with too many bodies. Candles burned low along the aisles, their flames trembling every time someone moved too fast. The pews had been torn out and stacked waist-high against the doors and lower windows, makeshift barricades reinforced with racks, folding chairs, anything that could slow a body down. Police officers, maybe a dozen left, stood watch near the entrances. They looked nothing like the men I was used to seeing on the streets. Helmets gone, jackets streaked with grime, eyes red, unfocused, darting at every noise. I sat on the cold stone floor near one of the columns, my back against centuries-old brick, handgun resting heavy in my lap. Ella moved quietly among the injured, checking pulses, whispering reassurances she didn't believe herself. Louis stood near the main doors, crowbar balanced across his shoulders like a yoke. The radio crackled. Multiple breaches reported. Unable to hold Faneuil perimeter. Static swallowed the rest. The thumping came again, closer now, more insistent, then shouting. A police officer sprinted down the aisle from the rear entrance, breath ragged. They're stacking up back there, not just wandering. They're piling into each other. As if summoned by the words, the rear barricade shuddered. Dust trickled down from the old beams. Would bowed inward. The infected didn't rush like a wave. They pressed, slow, relentless, bodies leaning into bodies, weight accumulating, broken limbs grinding uselessly as the mass behind them kept pushing. Someone fired a warning shot. The crack of the gun echoed violently inside the church, deafening. It was a mistake. Within seconds, the moaning outside intensified, swelling into a chorus that vibrated through the walls. Movement, sound, that was all it took. The first board split with sharp, splintering crack. Fingers pushed to the gap, gray, blood-slicked, nails torn away. A face followed, cheek crushed flat, one eye dangling uselessly, jaw working as it moaned wetly. "Headshots!" someone yelled. Gunfire erupted. Muzzle flashes lit the nave in violent bursts of white. The smell of burnt powder mixed with rot and old stone, making my eyes sting. I fired when I had a clear shot. 1, 2. Each impact dropped a body, but it didn't matter. The gap filled immediately. The infected climbed over their fallen, tripping, crawling, dragging themselves forward with grim persistence. The barricade failed in sections. A side door burst inward as hinges tore loose. 3 infected stumbled through, one missing an arm entirely. The bone at the shoulder snapped and blackened. Another had a leg bent backward at an impossible angle, dragging uselessly behind him. They didn't slow. A police officer went down under the weight of one, screaming as teeth snapped inches from his face. Louis swung the crowbar hard, crushing the infected skull with a dull, final sound. The officer scrambled away, sobbing, hands slick with blood. Panic spread faster than the infected. People ran for the aisles, tripping over debris, over each other. Someone dropped a flashlight that rolled, its beam spinning wildly across the ceiling, illuminating torn banners and terrified faces in frantic flashes. The radio screamed now, multiple overlapping voices, half-coherent orders, static tearing everything apart. Can't hold, fall back, repeat. The main doors began to give. I remember thinking, absurdly, about history, about lanterns and revolutions, and the idea that this place had once been a symbol of warning. 1 if by land, 2 if by sea. No one was coming now. Mark froze near the altar, staring as an infected dragged itself over the pew barricade. Intestines hanging loose, mouth opening and closed with that awful, eager sound. I grabbed his coat and hauled him backward, firing past his shoulder. The shot took it in the temple. It collapsed mid-lunge. "Move!" I shouted, my voice raw. We move now. Someone yelled that the south exit was still clear, barely. A narrow corridor between collapsed furniture and a fallen statue. The police tried to form a line to cover the escape, but they were exhausted, running on instinct and fear. We ran, through side doors and into the freezing dark, the church behind us echoing with gunfire and screams that cut off too suddenly. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Behind us, Old North Church, stone walls and history and faith, was swallowed not by fire, but by something colder, something that didn't care. As we hit the street and disappeared into the snow-choked maze of Boston, the bells began to ring. No one was pulling the ropes. The sound rolled out across the city anyway, loud and unmistakable, calling every infected for blocks. I knew then that the church hadn't just fallen. It had announced our escape, and the night surged after us. We fled past cops or burying ground, gravestones ghostly in the early light, over the Bill Russell Bridge, wind cutting like a blade, through Paul Revere Park, where the snow was trampled and stained. The Constitution waited, dark and solid, a relic of old wars. The first thing that struck me about the Constitution wasn't her size. It was her separation. She sat there in Charlestown Navy Yard like an idea pulled out of time, dark hull, Rigid lines, unmoving while the city burned quietly beyond her. Snow dusted her deck and rigging, softening the hard geometry of cannon ports and railings. She didn't belong to the chaos. She was apart from it. That mattered. Every other refuge we talked about, churches, schools, office buildings, had shared the same fatal flaw. Access. Doors. Windows. Stairwells. Too many ways in. Too many angles to defend when exhaustion set in or ammunition ran dry. The Constitution had exactly one way across. The drawbridge. Raised, it left a clean, brutal gap of frozen air and black water between the ship and the shore. No stairs. No ramps. Nothing the infected could understand or brute force their way over. They gathered the edge in small, confused clusters drawn by motion and sound, staring blankly at the unreachable shape beyond them. They didn't swim. They didn't plan. They didn't improvise. They just waited. We were stopped by the patrol of the entrance. Questioned at gunpoint, asked about previous whereabouts, possible bites or infection, fever, nausea, etc. All perfectly reasonable when protecting a possibly last bastion of hope in the city of Boston. Our small group of 5 that fled the church were thankfully allowed entry. Inside the ship, order emerged naturally, not because anyone was in charge, but because the environment demanded it. Narrow passageways limited panic. Compartments created natural zones. Sleeping, medical, storage. The old design, meant for discipline and efficiency under fire, translated disturbingly well to survival. Supplies were inventoried almost immediately. Food rationed, waterlogged. Medical kits pooled and redistributed. A former Navy corpsman took charge of triage without anyone arguing. A pair of National Guard soldiers, cut off from their unit, mapped firing arcs and established watch rotations. The cannons were inert, ceremonial, but the elevated decks gave clean lines of sight across the yard. Anyone approaching could be seen minutes before they became a threat. Sound carried over frozen water, giving early warning long before danger arrived. Most importantly, the ship enforced stillness. No engines to run, no alarms blaring, no reason to move unless necessary. The infected below responded to motion and noise, and here, above the water, above the streets, we could minimize both. Even our conversations dropped to murmurs, instinctively respectful of the silence. At some point during the morning, I realized something unsettling. This wasn't just a good place to hide. It was a place designed to endure. The Constitution had survived wars, storms, neglect, time itself. Her thick timbers, earned the nickname Old Ironsides for a reason, had repelled cannon fire. Rot and corrosion had been fought back again and again by generations who believed she was worth preserving. Now she was sheltering us from something no one had imagined when she was launched. I stood at the rail and looked back toward Boston. The skyline muted by snow and smoke, streets clogged with unmoving shapes that twitched when sound drifted their way. Police sirens still wailed occasionally, automated now, unanswered. Fires burned unchecked in the distance. A modern city, brought to its knees in less than a day. And here we were, saved not by innovation or speed or weapons, but by distance, water, and old wood. It wasn't perfect. Supplies would run out. Someone would get sick. People would argue. The future beyond the next few days was a blank page soaked in uncertainty. But for the first time since the public garden, since the frog pond, since the market floor slick with spilled chowder and blood, I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not safety, but possibility. The world hadn't ended everywhere at once. Not yet. And as long as the drawbridge stayed raised, as long as we stayed quiet, as long as the water stayed cold and the infected stayed dumb and relentless instead of clever, the USS Constitution might just be the one place in Boston that was never meant to fall. Not this time. Bear tree. That's it for today's story. We will love to see you again soon. Thanks for listening, and most importantly, stay safe out there.